Heartstopper. It was like the show that everybody wanted to watch all at once. And it just had such, I mean, I think it's because the show is so well made. You guys are fantastic in it. The whole cast is great. But it was also the moment that it landed where I just think it affected people emotionally in a very particular way at that moment. I hope you've heard this, because I think I know my experience is not unique in that. But it really registered with people at a time when they needed this kind of show. So thank you for that. But I'd love to go back to the beginning and ask both of you how you came to be in the show. Kit, maybe starting with you. How did you learn about the show? What was the audition process like?
Well, it was a pretty normal audition process for me, certainly at the beginning, in the sense that I got, an email from my agent telling me that there was this project happening and an opening for a self-tape. And, there was a pretty basic sort of synopsis of it, along with the link to the webcomic for Heartstopper. And I immediately read through probably the first volume's worth of Alice's novels, and was just like, this is something that's really, really special and really something I'd love to be a part of. And, there was a beautiful scene that was paired with it to try. And I really actually enjoyed, the audition process and sending in that self-tape. I originally auditioned for Joe's character, Charlie. And, it was a really kind of, really actually quite, fun audition process going through. I had a Zoom meeting, chemistry read with Joe, which was very weird, having a chemistry read on Zoom. Our chemistry must have been very good that they could see it over Zoom. But, and then we finally had our kind of final meeting as a main ensemble cast. And it was great. Overall, it was a really actually very enjoyable casting process, which isn't always the case.
Mm-hmm. Joe, how about for you? My understanding is this is your first filmed role.
Yeah.
How did you learn about the project and have the opportunity to audition for it?
Well, they did an open call for Heartstopper, which is where people who don't have agents or representation or haven't worked in the industry before can audition to. I think one of the main things they wanted to do with Heartstopper was create very authentic casting and very true to the comics. And a family friend saw the open casting and was like, you need to go for this. You literally look exactly like the character. And I'd always been interested in acting, and it's something that was one of my big passions, but never thought that I would ever be able to break into the industry, because I'm from a tiny island in the middle of nowhere in the UK, and I'd seen so many of my incredibly talented friends go off to drama school in London and sort of have to come back 4 years later because London's so expensive to live in and they haven't been in the right place in the right time. And I never thought that I'd be able to do that. And so when Heartstopper came along, it was very amazing. But I did a self-tape. It was the first ever self-tape I did, and it was like my phone on 10 books in my room, and it was very, very funny to look back. And I probably would look back and watch that and cringe out of my body, because I think the way I act now is very different to then. But then we did 3 or 4 Zoom chemistry reads with Kit, and then we did an in-person one, and that was, the rest is history.
Once you were both cast, before shooting started, did you have a rehearsal period? Did you have time where you got to hang out and just spend time together? Not that you necessarily need that, but the chemistry between the two of you, just the on-screen relationship is so powerful and compelling. And I'm just curious, how much time did you actually spend together before you were actually in front of camera?
Yeah, I think that we had, it must have been about a 2-week period that we had in rehearsals, which was, I found, invaluable. I thought they were super, super helpful to, firstly, for that chemistry aspect, but actually more importantly, to understand our characters a little bit more, to kind of get into the brains of that and, kind of just understand not only how we would work as a cast, but also how we would work with Eros, our wonderful director, and Alice, our writer, and just the whole kind of team in general. But I think I would actually say that we were quite lucky in the sense that Heartstopper very much follows the blossoming relationship that you see it right at the very beginning, when they don't really know each other. And we were able to, as we shot it in a pretty much chronological order, give or take, it was pretty chronological. We were able to really kind of develop our relationship while we were shooting, and just get closer and closer as our characters got closer, which was really, really very convenient for our on-screen chemistry. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, and also I think one of the only benefits of filming during COVID was that production didn't really want us to mix with people outside of the production, and so we'd spend all our weekends as a cast together as well as all our days on set. So we sort of bonded really quickly. But those 2 weeks rehearsal were, especially for me and some of the other cast who hadn't been on a set before, to just have time to sort of ease into it rather than start straight away was really great. And also having old pros like Kit was very helpful.
Mm-hmm. That's good. One of the most striking things about the show to me is it feels authentic to your ages, like the voice of the show, the sensibility of the show. A lot of times if I'm watching, you can watch a movie or a show about younger characters where it just feels like you can tell it was like some 50-year-old guy wrote the script, and it's like, this is what life is like for young people as seen through the mentality of somebody much older. And with this show, I don't know, it just felt like, I mean, this is a testament, I think, to Alice's writing, but also to the performance of the whole cast, that it really feels authentic and lived in and genuine. And I'm curious, could you talk a little bit about that, and also sort of how you worked with Alice on the moving this from the graphic novel to from the comics to the screen?
I mean, I think most of the kudos for that goes to Alice and her amazing skill at putting words on the page. And I think what's great about having a graphic novel as your source material is that you have shots already, and our director would very often have the script on one side of his iPad and the corresponding comic page on the other side, and more often than not, lots of the shots are exact replicas of the panels in the comic. And I mean, it's great as an actor to have a visual representation of what you're trying to do. But I think Alice is just a genius, and that's yeah. Yeah.
I also, the other thing that struck me when I first watched it was, and this just reflects on me, but as I was watching a couple episodes, I was like, I immediately captivated one over, and then I'm watching more, and I'm like, oh no, it's like, things are about to get very dark. This is going to take a turn. There's going to be like horrible violence or abuse or something, and it never happens. I mean, there is serious conflict and there's serious issues there, but there's a sense of joy and lightness to the entire thing that is really beautiful and unexpected. And it did not feel phony. It felt earned and real, but very unusual. And I was curious, is that something that you were aware of as you were making it? Is something that you all talked about?
I think that it's something that is obviously a very big element of Heartstopper, and I think in many ways it's kind of a selling point and something that separates it from other stories, especially queer stories, because queer media is so highly saturated with sort of negative, dark, heavy stories, and it's kind of very, very refreshing to have a story that is just positive and looks at the positives of the bright sides of life. And I think that there'll be certain things that I wasn't really aware of in shooting, but a lot of the reactions to, for example, one of the most iconic moments in the comics and in the show itself is Nick and Charlie's first kiss, and you do find that I found that a lot of people who I knew who were reacting to that were almost shocked that right before they sort of leaned in, like right before they, their lips touched, someone didn't burst in the door and stop them. Because that's, I think, become quite a common trope, especially in queer media, that they kind of, that two men aren't even allowed to kiss, especially not the first time they try to. And that kind of is one of the first times where you realize, oh, okay, this is just going to let this relationship play, it isn't going to, it's not that we don't have conflict in the show. And it's not that we don't have hurdles for the characters to kind of, work around. But it does also embrace the fact that it's two teenagers in love, and, they are figuring everything out. And it's very beautiful in that way, I think, that it just kind of lets the way things naturally want to happen, which I think is lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, Kit's just put it perfectly. I don't actually think I've got anything to add. It's just...
I mean, related to that, I was also thinking about the way the character Elle, played by Yasmin Finney, was introduced. Like, it's almost not commented on. It's like, this is a transgendered girl. It's just sort of introduced naturally without commentary, and was just handled beautifully in the show in a way that you really don't. I mean, it's usually made much more of a point about it. There's some more dramatic or traumatic storyline associated with it, and the way she's introduced was really unexpected and beautiful.
Yeah,
I think it's as it should be. I think it's I think Elle's story is a beautiful story, and I think that trans stories always, need to be told. But I think that I think the way that Alice wrote Elle's story and the story between Tao and Elle is beautiful and nuanced.
So, Joe, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your experience. So this is like your first, you'd obviously acted before,
yes.
But this was your first on-camera and first professional role. What was that? Sort of just talk us through first on-camera and first professional role. What was that? Sort of just talk us through a little bit about sort of how you got into that and what your experience was starting out in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think knowing absolutely nothing about this world helped, because it meant that I wasn't worrying about anything because I didn't have any idea what to worry about. And also it was nice. Quite a few of the main cast, it was our first on-screen roles, and so we had a nice bond because of that, and we could it's fine. He also doesn't know what he's doing, so it's fine. So I'm not the only one. And I think I knew I personally can see the scenes that we filmed at the start of the shoot versus the end of the shoot, just by how comfortable we are and how, I mean, that's just me being picky about myself and what am I acting. But I think I found it quite easier to get into the role because me and Charlie are so similar, and to have my first on-screen role as someone who I can relate to so much and can embody so much of myself in, I think gave me quite an easier ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I just have to say it's amazing. It was such a great ensemble, and everyone felt like a cohesive group of friends. I mean, the different groups, right? They were all believable, and everybody was acting with at a really high level, right? That these are great performances across the board. And actually, the first time I watched the show, I didn't know it was your first time acting. And then I went back and looked you up, and I was like, oh my God, that's kind of amazing. Yeah, it's beautiful work. Another thing I wanted to ask about thematically with the show that I thought was really interesting is, and it's not done in a heavy, overt way, but it does feel like it runs throughout the whole show, is dealing with mental health issues, or kind of the level of isolation, anxiety, the things that these kids are going through in a really, honest but not heavy-handed way. And I'm curious if that was something that you talked about with Alice or the director as you were prepping the shoot.
yeah, I mean, especially Charlie's character, he suffers with his mental health, and he has issues that happened in his past, which still are with him when we meet him in the series. And I think what I love so much about our show is that we don't hide away from these issues that teenagers go through and people go through in their daily lives. But you always, no matter what happens in the show, you always know it's going to be okay. And I think that is something that is there's a lack of in our media, because in all the TV dramas and film dramas today, you want to create suspense and drama, and you do that by making these scenarios in which the characters are suffering. But what Heartstopper does is it creates those scenarios and creates the drama, but you know it's going to be okay. You know Charlie's going to be okay in the end of it, and you know Nick and Charlie are always going to be together. So it makes for both an easier watch, but also quite important watch for like teenagers who might be going through similar things. And yeah, I love that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a really positive portrayal of life in general. And mental health is something that a lot of people, teens, and also I think the thing is with teens are often sort of undermined and treated very much as children, and their sort of mental health can be, often kind of understated by people, and it's just hormones, or it's just this, it's just that, and really it can be an extraordinarily difficult part of a person's life is their teenage years, because you have so many different new emotions happening, and I think Charlie is a prime example. I think Nick, you see things, sort of actual, like, sort of pretty much not traumatic events, but you see things happening in his life that really do sort of mess with his mental health, and mess with the way that he sees himself and his life. And I think that's something that Heartstopper does handle beautifully, because it's, very, very subtly written by Alice, but still very positively, and very, as Joe said, that everything's going to be okay at the end of the day. And that's, I think it's important for people, especially people who are going through tough times, to see a show where people who are like them, or even not like them, but just people who are sort of going through tough times as well, but there's a sense of hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that probably had something to do with why the show was so powerful for so many people, and still is, right? I mean, it came out at a time when a lot of people in very different circumstances were dealing with hard times, from the pandemic, from everything else. And this was like, I don't know, it was a real positive experience to spend time with your characters. Kit, I also wanted to talk about your relationship with Olivia Colman playing your mom. I love those scenes of the two of you together. And if you could talk about that. I mean, it's some of the most moving moments are just these, like, the way she responds to you when you open up to her and things is just so profoundly moving and great to see on screen.
Thank you. It's it will forever be an honor to be able to act with someone of Olivia's sort of caliber, but also just to be acting with someone who is as wonderful as she is. She is such a gorgeous human being, and a gorgeous actor as well. She is extraordinary to work with. She's so effortless. It doesn't feel like she's trying. It just feels like she sort of will read a scene, and she might take a bit of direction, she might do this, that, but she understands exactly what's going on, exactly how that character is feeling, and can just portray it so effortlessly and so subtly. And it's so impressive to be in the room and see her do it, because she can literally just bring, I mean, it's cliche, but bring the words to life. We only had about 2 days to shoot with her on season 1, and it was packed. There aren't that many scenes really with Olivia in season 1, but we really did pack everything into those 2 days. And we did it tactically. We did all the sort of light-hearted stuff on the first day and then got into the heavier stuff. So I had about a day to sort of form this relationship with her and have some chemistry of son and mother. But yeah, I was terrified. I thought it was going to be extraordinarily difficult, and it was in many ways to sort of keep up with her. But at the same time, I find acting with someone of her caliber, you do just find yourself trying to get up there and keep up. And I think it was really, it was a really wonderful 2 days of shooting, and I was so happy with. And I think it was really, it was a really wonderful 2 days of shooting, and I was so happy with the final result of that final scene. Especially, it was the scene that I really wanted to get right, and I was really hoping that we would be able to get it right. And yeah, the reaction's been beautiful, really touching, and exactly what we wanted. And yeah, I think that it was really a lovely ending to a lovely show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know, anything you can share about your experience of suddenly being in the limelight in that way and having to deal with that and sort of whatever, the positives and negatives of that coming off this show?
I don't know how to describe it. It's very strange, amazing, overwhelming. Like, I'm so proud of our show and what we've created as a huge group of people. And it's so great that it's managed to reach far more people than we ever expected it to. But it's been a weird couple of months, and
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think it's deeply overwhelming in many ways, in positive ways and negative ways. You see, I've seen some absolutely, just incredible reactions to the show, and meeting people and hearing the way that they've been impacted by it, and by certain scenes, and by that final scene with Olivia, and some gorgeous scenes that Joe did. There's a gorgeous scene with Joe and Jenny, who plays Tori, his sister, where they discuss his mental health, and it's beautifully acted, and it's beautifully written, and it's I cried when I first saw it. And yeah, but at the same time, we are both still, I think in some ways we're mature for our age, but in some ways we're still just kids, and it's terrifying being in the big bad world with a lot of eyes on you, and you feel like everything you do is a mistake, and it's heavy for an 18 and 19-year-old. But I would say that you can never. It's always been my dream to be an actor, and I think that some things come with that are not 100% ideal, but you have to ask yourself, is it worth that dream? And I've always wanted to be able to do this, and I, it's still my favorite thing to do. Is to be able to bring things to life on screen and on stage, and I think that I feel extraordinarily lucky to be able to do that. So, yeah,
that's great. Well, so I know you probably can't talk about this, but I'll ask anyway. I know you're in production on season 2. Is there anything you can share about it? Does it cover the sort of volume 2 of the next phase of the graphic novel, or whatever you can share? And when is it? And do you know when it's coming out?
I don't know what we can say.
What do you want to share, Joe? Yeah, what do you want to share?
That's the thing, because I want to share. I always get told off. It's based on comics, so yeah. If you can get an educated guess from that.
Great.
Yeah. It's very exciting. People should be excited for it. And we've had a lot of fun making it. We've put our, we're absolutely exhausted. We're putting our blood, sweat, and tears into it. And yeah, we're all desperately hoping that people like it as much as season 1.
Great. Well, I have to say, I wasn't familiar with the comic before the show. And so I went back and have read most of it. And I didn't know Alice Oseman's work before this. And